So this is what it's like to do a video sober. I don't care for it. Hi BookTube, I am a Rebecca without my Sarah and without my wine. This is like Starbucks. I'm not having wine because it's like 1 in the afternoon. So I got my blanket scarf that Sarah gave me and I'm cozy, and I got my mocha. I voted today. I hope you also voted today or yesterday or the day before, depending on when this goes up. I had a great reading month. I read 9 books and none of them were under 4 stars. I had like such a good reading month, and I caught up on my reading goals, which I lowered substantially in order to catch up. The first book I finished in October wasn't a horror novel. Probably one of the only non-ones I'm going to be talking about. I had finished some of it in September and then I finished it in October, and it's Pachinko by Min Jin Lee. Wow. This was pretty gut-wrenching, which I expected. But still, even when you expect something to be gut-wrenching, sometimes you're like, fuck, why did I? This is a multi-generational story. One of the early generations is a young Korean woman who gets pregnant and then ends up fleeing to Japan. It spans many, many, many years. It's pretty long. It really will fuck you up pretty good. It's also great. It was great. I loved it. I kind of wanted to die sometimes, but I learned a lot, and that's good. And the characters were very real, and they made a lot of mistakes, and you kind of hated them but loved them at the same time. No spoilers, but one thing that was really hard is like you'd spend so much time with the character and then the book would suddenly just be like, and then they were dead. And then they go to the next chapter and it was like 10 years later. And you're like, wait a minute, let me just process the fact that this character I've known for hundreds of pages has just died. Like, can you give me a second book? Can you give me a second? When Deb and I were talking about this, because I read it with my friend Deb, she kind of said that she didn't feel like it had a lot of payoff for the misery at the end, and I did agree with her at the time, but like giving it a little bit more time to stew and process, I do feel like there was kind of a bit of payoff at the end, but it is, you are suffering for a while. I am finding that I very much enjoy these multi-generational stories like Homegoing by Jesse, or ones that take place just over like hundreds of years, like Circe. Did I say Circe right? I've heard it said so many ways. I'm just gonna say it like that. So if you have recommendations for something like that, I want to suffer, I guess, next year. The next book I read was the start of my horror reading, Frozen Charlotte by Alex Bell. I predicted this to be just a cheesy, kind of predictable Halloween read, and it fucking was. This is about a girl whose friend has recently died, her best friend died, and now she's staying with her, oh my god, how are they related? Her cousins. Are they like blood cousins? I don't remember now, because I feel like they hint at a romance between them. Whatever, it's like Arrested Development then. Okay, so Sophie, her best friend's dad, she goes to stay with her cousins at this creepy house. I think it was a school. It was like a school for girls. And she gets there and obviously weird shit happens, and it's kind of cheesy and kind of predictable, but it was great. It was exactly what I wanted. And it's definitely a book that jumps right in. The writing is very simple, and I liked that. I don't mean simple in a bad way. I mean simple in a good way. But the book starts, and they're starting like with a Ouija board, and it's just like immediately ghosty stuff. And there's a couple of like legitimately creepy moments. It was definitely fun. It's definitely like a fun, predictable Halloween read if that's something you're ever looking for. Next I read From Bad to Cursed by Katie Alender. This is the sequel to Bad Girls Don't Die. I feel like I could talk about the plot of this one though without giving away anything that happened in Bad Girls Don't Die. Bad Girls Don't Die I liked. It was also predictable, like super predictable. I remember like being like not even halfway through that book and I'm like, how did you not solve everything in this book? Because I've solved everything in this book and I'm an idiot. This book is about Lexi. So Lexi finds out her little sister, she's like kind of shy in a new school, and she ends up joining like a group of girls, and it kind of seems like a weird club, and then she finds out, this is all kind of like on the back of the book, she finds out that they worship like a demon and it's making them very popular. So Lexi joins the club with the intent of like breaking their connection to the demon, but then she's like, well, why would I want to do that? Like, this demon gives me gifts, and She's kind of cursed throughout most of the novel. That made it very interesting. It had a very The Craft vibe. If you've ever seen The Craft, it's like one of my favorite movies. I love that movie. And it definitely had that kind of going for it, which I really, really, really enjoyed. I will say my only problem with this and the first book and another book I read by Katie Alender here is that there are several points in the book that everything could have been solved kind of early on, and the author like didn't really know how to make it, so they didn't solve it because the book still needed to go on. So she had like kind of silly reasons for, you know, like the characters not doing really basic things that they should have done. So I don't love that, but overall I didn't care. It was also a little too long. I feel like this could have been shorter for sure. They could have taken out some of this time when Lexi was cursed and kind of questioning things, and I was interested because my third novel, which is the one I've been querying for, and it's not going well, but that's okay. My protagonist is also cursed in that one, and it's kind of very difficult. So I like totally understand a lot of the shit that Katie Alender did. I feel for her because I understand it's very hard to write from the point of view of someone who's cursed, and the unreliable narrator thing. That's not easy. So I get it, girl. Like, I get it. Next up, I read The Bone Witch by Chupeco. There were parts that were a little eerie, but for the most part, like, I realized kind of early on, I'm like really like having trouble keeping books in frame. I realized kind of early on this is a fantasy novel. And I don't read a lot of fantasy novels anymore. I feel like I used to be like a big fantasy fan, and then I realized like, wow, I'm really not. And just because I have my problems with YA fantasy, and then I have my problems with adult fantasy, and they're separate problems, but they're both, I don't know. But I read it faster than I was expecting to read it. This is about T. She finds out that she is a bone witch. This is a world where there are all kinds of witches, and bone witches are the ones who are like, everyone's afraid of them and people don't like them and stuff like that. And she raises her brother from the dead, and she's taken from her family and is learning how to fit in the society as this type of witch. And there's a lot of rules and regulations, and they're not all right, and she's being forced to follow them. It's very interesting. I will say that there is action in this book. I would describe it almost as like a superhero origin story where like you are getting like witchy stuff, but maybe not as much as you expected, because T also has to navigate like the society and these relationships and stuff like that. So there's a lot of like T having to change her wardrobe and being fitted for outfits and things like that. So I think a lot of the complaints that come from this book are people who didn't expect that chunk of the novel. So know that going in, and I think you'll enjoy it a lot more. I was worried to read this because of people saying that nothing happened and they thought it was too slow, and I'm not really sure where all that came from. I don't know where the nothing happened came from, but people also said that about Fire and Stars, which is like that's a whole other rant, y'all. But I fucking love that book, and like I am severely disappointed in the things that people say about it. And I also think that if it was a book about two men falling in love, two princes and not two princesses, it probably wouldn't have received the same fucking criticism. But again, wow, that's a whole other... I'm not even drunk, and this is the mocha talking. This is my mocha talking. Next I read Dark Places by Gillian Flynn, because that's her name now. I'm so sorry, Gillian Flynn. I don't know how to pronounce your name, and everyone says it differently, and I feel weird. So this is about a woman whose family was murdered when she was a little girl, and her older brother were the only survivors, and she testified that she saw her older brother killing her family, and she escaped. And years down the line, Libby is alone, and she doesn't really have very much money, and she lives a very weird life where people kind of know who she is, but for a terrible, terrible fucked up reason. And this group of people who are like obsessed with old crimes and stuff like that offer her money for like her story and for like pieces of her past, and maybe asking her to talk to people from her past that she hasn't talked to in a long time, including her brother. Libby meets up with them and quickly realizes that they want to prove that her brother's innocent, and it's kind of forcing her to dig up deep, deep memories. The characters were all in a very gray area. Libby was great. I loved her. She was like this... I feel like Gillian Flynn sees like bitter women so well, like in Gone Girl too, because I don't like the idea of like the bitter 30, 40 something woman, because most of the time they're written by men and they're like, oh, they're bitter because their stomach's not flat anymore, and like that's not why older women are bitter. I promise. I fucking assure you, That ain't it. This was good. I liked it. I never at one point felt like I knew what the end was going to be, which is great in a thriller. I don't try to solve thrillers either. I don't like to. Next I read The Hike by Drew Magary, and here's where the video is really going to bulk up because I need to rant a little bit. This, I realized, was the first book I read by a man in like 3 months. And that, I don't even remember what book that was. And that was the first book I had read written by a man in like 3 months. So I guess every 3 months I read a book written by a man, and then I remember why I don't read books written by men. It's about a dude named Ben who is on like a business trip, and he goes to the back of the hotel to go for a walk or a hike, and weird shit starts happening, and then he gets very lost, and the hike gets weirder and weirder and weirder and weirder and weirder as it goes. It's very paranormal, just straight off the bat. This isn't like a guy lost in the woods. My first complaint, my one really just big complaint that I need to make is Ben is lost in the woods for about a day, and he goes to sleep, and he wakes up in the middle of the night, and there's a fire, and he sees like this woman that he liked in college, and then he has sex with her. Ben is a married man with several children. Ben, bud, it's been not very long. Why are you doing this? It took like 30 pages. I'm like not even really spoiling anything. This was in the first 30 pages of the fucking book. This is like one of the first things that he does is cheat on his wife. And I don't understand why. It was very unnecessary. It really wasn't brought up. It was brought up a couple of times later as he felt kind of guilty, but it didn't add anything to the journey or to Ben or to anything except my rage. The rest of the book, he's talking about how much he wants to get back to his wife and his children. My dude, it took you less than 48 hours to break your vows and cheat on your wife. Like, how upset are you? If it had happened like years, like let's say he'd been lost for ages and then he fucked someone else, I get it. Like, it's fine. But it was like a day. Anyway, I kind of like this book. Aside from that, I have to like erase that part of the novel that it even happened because it was unnecessary. I don't understand why it happened. It was weird. It was just, anyway. The rest of the book I really enjoyed. It was a weird ass book. It was very bizarre, and it was kind of funny. It was like a funny book, which I like. I like weird comedy. Weird kind of horror, violent-ish sometimes comedy. Really enjoy that. That's like right up my alley. So I liked this book. Just know that it's kind of bizarre and that Ben's a fucking moron in the first 30 pages, and you just kind of have to like block that out. And Drew, why did you write that scene? Next I read Certain Dark Things by Silvia Moreno-Garcia. I fucking loved this book. I don't know why this has like, it's like a 3.6 I think on Goodreads, which isn't a bad Goodreads rating, but it's not very high, and I don't understand why. This was like, from the beginning, loved it. I'm not going to tell you much about it because I didn't know much about it, and I ended up enjoying it so much more without knowing much about it. It's a very like science fiction-y, science fantasy novel about like warring vampire clans in Mexico City. It's really fucking cool. There's all different kinds of vampires. They've all evolved in different ways, depending on their location. There's a lot of commentary on the white European vampires, and it's really just riveting. I loved it. I loved the two like main characters. It's a book that jumps a lot of different points of views, more than I thought, and it's kind of short. And I was expecting maybe one or two, and then I was getting other points of views, and every time it added one, I had a moment where I was like, oh, another point of view, I don't know about this. And then I was fine. There was no point of view that I was like, oh, this fucker again. This was super dark, super bloody, super fun. Great characters, great villains, good shit. Next I read Small Spaces by Katherine Arden. This is a middle grade novel. It's about a girl, what's her name? God, I don't remember anyone's name ever. Ollie. So Ollie finds this woman in the middle of the woods. She's about to throw away a book, and Ollie's like, no, please don't throw that book away. So she gets the book. It's called Small Spaces, and she starts reading it, and there's weird things happening in the book, and then she notices those weird things are happening around her. Legitimately, this was scarier than every fucking Stephen King novel ever written. Maybe that's a little bit of shade on Stephen King. I'm not really a fan. But this was creepy as fuck. Like, I can't believe this is for like middle grade children. At its heart, it is about grief and things much, much deeper than just the spooky setting that it's in. It does have the trope of like the dead mom thing, because Ollie's mother is passed away in this one. She's been dead. I do love her dad though. Like, Ollie's dad is adorable. He like wears flannels and bakes all the time. I can tell I'm getting old because the entire book I just wanted to marry Ollie's dad and be her new stepmother. This was wonderful, really spooky, really short, a lot of good lessons there. Very Coraline, like, if I were to compare it to anything. The last book I read was The Dead Girls of Hysteria Hall by Katie Alender, and I don't even know how to tell you about this one without giving it away. I will tell you the very, very basic shit that I knew, and then know that it goes way deeper. So this is about a girl named Delia. Delia has inherited this old abandoned asylum from her aunt who passed away. She goes there with her family. They're going to clean it up that summer and then sell it, and then weird shit starts to happen. This did not take the turn that I thought it was going to take. And I just don't want to tell you why, because it was so great to read it without knowing what was going to happen. Just know that it's spooky and it's great and so good. It was such a good Halloween read, but I would recommend reading it. Fuck it, read it for Christmas. I don't give a shit. The only complaints I have, or the other complaints I had about Katie Allender's books, is that there's a couple of times where, like, she didn't have great explanations for why things were happening, I think. And there are times in this book and in From Bad to Curse that I feel like her main characters were suddenly able to do things or not do things that didn't seem to make sense. She just needed it to make sense for the plot. But I'm able to suspend my disbelief quite a bit when I read books, especially horror, so I didn't really mind that much. And it was still a fucking blast. Like, this was a great way to end October. So these are my October reads. I enjoyed them. Let me know if you had some favorite reads in October. I'm not sure what I'd pick as a favorite here. Couldn't do it. I have to really think about it. I had such a good reading month. I loved like so many of these books. They were all 4 stars or more. Join me next time when I'm talking about something else, hopefully with Sarah, but I don't know.